There's something that happens when a woman walks into a room and she's not seeking permission to be seen. She's not waiting for someone to notice her, compliment her, or validate her choices. She's already chosen herself. That kind of energy, quiet, grounded, unapologetic confidence, is impossible to ignore. When you're in the presence of it, you feel it before you can describe it. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it speaks volumes. And when it comes to love, especially the attention of a man you admire, that kind of energy shifts the dynamic completely. A lot of people think confidence is about being outspoken, charismatic, or dressing in a way that turns heads. But real confidence isn't about showing off, it's about showing up. As you are, without performing. You're not trying to win someone over. You're not scripting your next move based on what you think he'll like. You're not editing yourself. You're simply being, and trusting that being is enough. This kind of authenticity is rare, especially in a world that constantly tells us to be more attractive, more agreeable, more accommodating. But the truth is, when a man sees a woman who isn't chasing anyone's validation, something in him pays attention. He doesn't see someone trying to impress him. He sees someone who is already impressed with her own life. That's the kind of energy that draws him in. Because while everyone else is trying to mold themselves into what they think he wants, she's living in a way that reflects what she wants, and that's far more compelling. You could be standing in front of the man you like, wearing something simple, saying something ordinary, doing nothing extraordinary, and still be unforgettable. Not because of what you look like, but because of how you carry yourself. Confidence without approval seeking is deeply attractive because it creates a sense of mystery. He wonders, what is it about her? Why does she feel so easy to be around but so hard to figure out? That intrigue isn't created through games. It's born from self-possession. You know your value and you're not trying to pitch it to him. You're not in sales mode. You're just living in it. A confident woman is the opposite of reactive. She doesn't spiral if he doesn't text back right away. She doesn't change her weekend plans to be more available for him. She doesn't spend her time decoding every word he says to search for hidden meaning. Instead, she has a full life, friends, goals, joy, peace. And her attention is something he has to earn, not something she gives away for free. And that's a powerful shift, because the second you stop trying to win someone's love, you put yourself in a position where love becomes something mutual, not something you have to convince someone to give you. She's not indifferent. She's interested, but she's not dependent on the outcome. If he's into her, great. If he's not, that's okay too. That kind of emotional neutrality creates safety and excitement all at once. There's no pressure, no desperation, just presence, just connection, just real, moment-by-moment interaction without a hidden agenda. And men feel that. They lean into that because it's so rare to meet someone who isn't hoping they'll complete them. When you meet a woman who is already whole, you're drawn to her not because you feel needed, but because you feel wanted. That's an entirely different energy. And let's be clear, this isn't about pretending you don't care. This isn't about coldness or being aloof. It's about showing up with your full heart while still being grounded in your own center. It's knowing that your world doesn't shrink or collapse based on whether or not he feels the same. You can like someone, admire someone, even deeply want to build something with them, and still remain anchored in your own self-worth. You don't need him to choose you to feel chosen. The irony is, the moment you stop trying to be chosen is often the moment you become irresistible. Because nothing is more appealing than someone who sees themselves clearly, who knows their worth and isn't willing to trade it for temporary attention. That kind of woman doesn't chase love, she attracts it. And when she finally lets someone in, it's not because she needs them to complete her. It's because she sees them as a partner to add to an already fulfilling life. There's something effortlessly powerful about a woman who knows how to enjoy herself. Not in a forced, look at me kind of way, but in a way that's so natural, so grounded in presence, that it's almost disarming. When a man sees her smiling genuinely, laughing without hesitation, and engaging in the moment without performing, something shifts in how he sees her. She's not waiting for him to react. She's not studying his facial expressions or adjusting her energy based on how much attention he's giving. She's just being, and in that space of presence, she becomes captivating. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they're around someone they like is trying to control the outcome. Every move becomes strategic. Every word is filtered through the lens of, how will this make him feel about me? The problem with that is it kills the spark before it ever has a chance to grow. There's nothing playful about pressure. There's no joy in performing. When you're more focused on being liked than actually connecting, you turn every interaction into an audition. And that's exhausting for you and for him. But when you're able to let go of that need for control, when you're able to release the grip of expectation, something opens up. There's space, there's breath, there's chemistry. Because now, instead of trying to pull something from him, you're creating an environment where he can naturally lean in. You're not forcing anything, you're allowing. And that allowance, that openness without attachment, is what makes you unforgettable. Men notice when you're genuinely enjoying yourself. They sense it. It puts them at ease. When you laugh without overthinking how you sound, when you express interest without trying to look too interested, when you let your natural charm shine without editing it, you give him a gift, the permission to do the same. You become a mirror that reflects comfort and emotional safety. He doesn't have to impress you or put on a mask. He can just be because you're already doing that yourself. That's the beauty of joy that's not tethered to outcome. You're not acting happy to get a reaction. You're happy because you're choosing it. You're in your own vibe, your own flow, and if he happens to be a part of that moment, great. But if he doesn't respond the way you hoped, your inner state doesn't collapse. You're still whole, still full, still grounded in your own energy. That's what makes your joy real, not reactive. And it's that realness that draws him in. You're not trying to convince him that you're fun to be around. You're just being someone who is fun to be around. That's a massive difference. One comes from a place of proving, the other comes from a place of authenticity. And authenticity is magnetic. When you're in the company of someone who's not chasing attention, not seeking approval, and not trying to manipulate an outcome, the whole interaction feels lighter. There's no tension, no script, just genuine connection that's allowed to evolve naturally. That's when he starts to notice things he didn't before. He notices the way your eyes light up when you talk about something you love. He notices how comfortable you are in silence, how you don't rush to fill every gap with noise. He notices how your energy doesn't spike or fall based on whether he's leaning in or pulling back. And that steadiness, that emotional balance, becomes incredibly attractive. Because in a world full of people trying too hard, you're the rare one who's just being real. You don't need to create a highlight reel for him. You don't need to entertain him or keep him engaged like it's your job. You're not his distraction. You're his invitation to something deeper. And when you're able to express joy in a way that's self-sourced, when your happiness isn't reliant on him but is shared with him, it creates a completely different dynamic. You're not asking him to complete your experience. You're inviting him into one that's already alive. That's why joy without attachment is so powerful. It tells him that your world is already beautiful, already fulfilling, already enough. And he doesn't have to be the source of that. He gets to be a part of it if he chooses. And that choice becomes more meaningful, more compelling, because it's not about need. It's about desire. It's not about proving your worth. It's about letting your natural light show and seeing who steps forward to meet you there. There's a difference between being agreeable and being grounded. A lot of people confuse being nice with being attractive. They think saying yes, going along with everything, and avoiding conflict is what keeps a connection alive. But that's not what earns respect. That's not what builds lasting attraction. If anything, it chips away at your value slowly, because the second you make someone else the center of every decision, even in small ways, you begin to disappear in the process. What creates real connection isn't endless flexibility, it's boundaries, and the way you communicate those boundaries calmly, clearly, and consistently reveals an emotional intelligence that's rare and deeply magnetic. When you set a boundary, you're saying, I respect myself enough to take care of my energy. I know what's okay with me and what isn't. I know what feels good and what drains me. And I'm not going to betray that just to keep someone around. That level of self-awareness is powerful because most people don't know how to do that. They don't know how to speak up without turning it into a fight. They don't know how to express a standard without making it sound like a threat. But when you do, when you show someone, especially a man you admire, that you have a healthy relationship with your own needs. He sees you differently, not as someone who's going to twist herself to fit his life, but as someone who will only allow what aligns with her own. The mistake many people make is thinking boundaries push people away, but in reality, they do the opposite. They create clarity, they create structure, they create a sense of safety, not just for you, but for the other person too. When a man sees that you can calmly say, "This is what works for me," or "That's not something I'm okay with," without flinching, he gets to relax. He doesn't have to guess. He doesn't have to read between the lines. He knows where you stand, and more importantly, he knows you won't abandon yourself to try to win him. And this doesn't mean you're rigid. It doesn't mean you can't compromise or adjust, but you're doing it from a place of intention, not insecurity. You're not giving in because you're afraid he'll leave. You're not nodding along because you don't want to seem difficult. You're making decisions based on what feels aligned, not what feels convenient. And that makes you rare, because people who know how to honor themselves without needing to control others are people who are emotionally safe to love. That safety doesn't come from you agreeing with everything he says or wants. It comes from you knowing yourself well enough to stay honest, even when it's uncomfortable. Like when he says something that doesn't sit right, and instead of brushing it off, you say, "Hey, can I be honest with you about how that landed for me?" Not from a place of blame, not from a need to start a drama, but from a place of authenticity. That moment may not feel easy, but it builds trust. It tells him, "This woman will tell me the truth." And that truth, even when it challenges him, becomes the glue that holds deeper connection together. Setting boundaries also means you don't overextend. You're not always available at the drop of a text. You're not canceling your own plans because he suddenly has time. You're not molding your schedule around his convenience. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you value your time. You have priorities, commitments, a rhythm to your life that doesn't shift every time someone shows up with interest. And that sends a message. It tells him that your time is earned, not assumed, that your presence isn't guaranteed, it's invited when the effort is matched. And men pay attention to that. They notice when you're not instantly reachable, not always ready to adjust, not bending over backward to make things easy, because it suggests that you're not looking for someone to fill a gap. You're looking for someone who adds value. And if he wants a place in your life, he'll have to step into it with respect, not assumption. Emotional intelligence isn't just about reading the room. It's about reading yourself, knowing what you're okay with, knowing when to say no, knowing how to express it in a way that's firm but kind. And when a man sees that, really sees it in how you carry yourself, in how you handle disagreement, in how you protect your space, he knows he's not dealing with someone who's just hoping to be liked. He's dealing with someone who's already chosen herself. Someone who doesn't confuse love with approval. Someone who can be soft, warm, generous, but never at the expense of her own inner peace. Vulnerability has become a buzzword, but most people still misunderstand what it really means. It's not about spilling every detail of your past or turning every conversation into a deep confessional. It's not about crying to prove you have feelings or revealing your pain just to get sympathy. Vulnerability, when it's real and selective, is an act of strength, not weakness. It's the quiet courage to let someone see the parts of you that aren't polished or rehearsed. Not all at once, not with everyone, but with intention and care. And when you show a man that kind of vulnerability in small, sincere moments, it does something to him. It opens the door to emotional intimacy, and that's the foundation of real love. So many people are stuck in the surface level. They perform confidence, humor, charm. They can keep the conversation going for hours, and they're good at being fun and interesting. But then something strange happens. Even with all that charisma, the connection doesn't deepen, it plateaus. Because beneath all the sparkle, they're not letting anyone in. They're not letting anyone see the parts of themselves that are raw, honest, and real. And you can only build a connection that's as deep as you're willing to go. When you choose to reveal something meaningful, not to get attention, not to manipulate emotion, but just to share a truth, you break through the noise. Maybe it's a small story about something that shaped you. Maybe it's admitting a fear or a moment where you felt uncertain. Maybe it's just saying, "That actually really matters to me," when the easy thing would have been to play it cool. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be honest. because honesty, when it's brave and unguarded, is what creates real closeness. And what's powerful about selective vulnerability is that it's earned. You're not giving him a backstage pass to your soul on the first date. You're not opening up because you're desperate for connection. You're choosing to share something that matters, and that choice means more because you don't give that to just anyone. When a man sees that you're careful with your heart but still willing to open it slowly, he understands that if he wants more of you, he has to show up with the same emotional presence. That changes the dynamic entirely. You're no longer just someone who's fun to be around. You become someone who feels emotionally real. You're not just a good time, you're a safe space. And that safety doesn't come from pretending to be perfect. It comes from being human, from letting your guard down enough for him to actually see you. Not the version of you that performs, the version that lives behind the performance. Men aren't taught to open up easily. They've been conditioned to keep things light, to push down emotion, to avoid showing too much. So when a woman goes first, when she models emotional courage in a way that's grounded and calm, it gives him permission to do the same. And when he starts to feel safe enough to express himself, that's when something profound happens. The dynamic shifts from attraction to attachment, from chemistry to connection. That's where love begins to grow. Not in the fireworks, but in the quiet trust that builds between two people who are willing to be real with each other. The key is being selective, because vulnerability without boundaries isn't intimacy, it's emotional dumping. When you give too much too soon, you overwhelm the other person and lose the value of what you're offering. But when you reveal small pieces of your inner world at the right time, it lands differently. It makes him lean in. It makes him curious. It makes him feel something that isn't just attraction. It's investment. He starts to care, not just about what you're saying, but about you, about your heart, about your story. And he wants to be the kind of person you feel safe continuing to open up to. And that's what real connection demands. Not perfection, not a curated image, but presence. The willingness to be seen, to be known, even in the parts you usually hide. The willingness to share truth, not just charm. The courage to say, this is who I am underneath the surface. And then let the other person choose how they want to respond. Because when a man sees that, not just who you are on the outside, but what you carry on the inside, and he feels honored to be let in, that's when love stops being an idea and starts becoming something real. There's something undeniable about a woman who has standards and doesn't flinch when they're tested. Not because she's trying to prove a point, but because her standards are simply a reflection of how she lives. They're not negotiable in the heat of the moment. They're not adjusted based on who walks into her life. They're not rules meant to control others. They're a compass that keeps her grounded. And when a man sees that, when he realizes he can't just say the right thing or offer shallow effort and expect access to her, he either steps up or steps out. Either way, she wins, because she's not playing a game of who wants her, she's playing a game of who's worth her. So many people lower the bar to keep someone around. They think maybe if I don't ask for too much, they'll stay. Maybe if I'm easier, more flexible, more patient, they'll eventually meet me where I am. But that's a dangerous hope, because the second you lower your standard, you stop attracting people who can meet it. And what starts as flexibility turns into resentment. You begin to compromise on what matters, and in the process, you forget that love isn't supposed to feel like begging. You're not supposed to constantly explain what you need. You're not meant to settle for potential while starving for consistency. Love doesn't have to be earned through suffering. Real love meets you where you already are, and then elevates you from there. When a woman carries herself with self-respect, it shows in the smallest of ways, in how she responds to late-night texts that offer nothing but convenience, in how she disengages from conversations that are one-sided, in how she doesn't chase after someone whose effort is inconsistent. Not out of bitterness or fear, but out of alignment. She's not available for breadcrumbs. She doesn't entertain confusion. Her peace matters more than attention, and her boundaries are non-negotiable. She doesn't broadcast these things with attitude or aggression. She simply lives them, and in doing so, she teaches others how to treat her, not through words, but through action. That kind of energy does something to a man. It challenges him, not in a way that makes him defensive, but in a way that makes him think. He starts asking himself if he's really showing up, if he's really putting in the kind of effort that deserves her time. Because when a man meets a woman who doesn't need him but chooses him only when he's consistent, intentional, and respectful, he realizes this is not someone he can win with half-hearted moves. She won't be impressed by charm without follow-through. She won't feel flattered by promises with no action. She's seen too much to be swayed by anything less than real. That doesn't mean she's closed off or hard to reach. In fact, it's the opposite. She's open, but only to those who approach her with clarity. She's warm, but only to those who bring consistency. She's receptive, but not to those who expect intimacy without commitment. Her softness is protected by strength. Her kindness is guarded by discernment. And that balance is rare. Most people swing between extremes. They're either too guarded to let anyone in or too available to protect themselves. But the woman with standards lives in the center. She can be loving without losing herself. She can be patient without waiting forever. She can be loyal without tolerating disrespect. Men notice this. It might even catch them off guard at first. They're used to getting away with doing the bare minimum and still being adored. But when they meet a woman who requires more, not in a demanding or critical way, but in a grounded, graceful way, it forces them to reevaluate their own habits. Some will run from that. They're not ready. But the ones who stay, the ones who lean in and rise up, those are the men who understand that real love isn't a transaction. It's a reflection of mutual value. And that value starts with how you treat yourself. Because your standards don't push the right man away, they attract him. They separate the noise from the signal. They create a filter that only allows in what's aligned. And when you live by them, not just in your words, but in your daily choices, you don't need to chase anything. You become the kind of woman who inspires better behavior just by being herself. Not because she's trying to change anyone, but because her presence naturally raises the bar. And that's what makes her unforgettable. Not her beauty, not her charm, but the simple fact that she refuses to settle for anything less than what she knows she's worthy of.